Habakkuk, love that name, Habakkuk, the best named prophet, the prophet Habakkuk posed a very specific question to God. O Lord, how long shall I cry for help, and you will not listen? O Lord, how long shall I cry for help, and you will not listen? Why do you make me see wrongdoing and look at trouble? Destruction and violence are before me. Strife and contention arise. This is where the faith journey begins for each and every one of us. If our lives were perfect, we would have no reason to be here. If human life were fair, if the world always made sense, if every question we ever asked always had a specific answer that was satisfying to us, we would have no reason to be here, especially on a drizzly, cold, gray morning in December. We gathered together specifically because we're able to look around at the world and look inwardly in our own lives, and we're able to name that it's not perfect. In fact, sometimes it's downright horrible. No one seems to get what they deserve. Good people suffer tragedy, inexplicably. Righteous people can't earn a living for themselves. Evil gets rewarded possibly more often than it's punished. Who is deserving in this life? Who is deserving of forgiveness and mercy? Who is deserving of strife and heartache? We begin our new year, we begin our faith journey when we find ourselves in the shoes of Habakkuk. When we begin to cry out to God, how long, O Lord, how long shall we cry out to you before you do something? And God responds to the prophet's question. God says this, write the vision. Make it plain on tablets, for there is still a vision for the appointed time. It speaks of the end, and it does not lie. If it seems to hesitate, wait for it. It will surely come. It will not delay. Look at the proud and successful. Their spirit is not right with them. But the righteous live by their faith. The world we live in teaches us lessons every single day of our lives. These lives we live, the things we do, the way we go about doing them, the resources we can count on, they all teach us what to expect from life and what to expect from the world. Living in a digital world in the most wealthy superpower in human history, we expect things to happen very, very quickly. We expect our desires to be met with a click of a button. We expect to have everything we want with the flip of a switch, with the turning of a faucet. Just like that, immediately. We've all internalized all the jingles we've ever heard. My way, right away. At Burger King and everywhere else. That's when I want it, that's how I want it, that's where I want it now. It's like the girl from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Are you with me? I want it now. I want a party. We all have it. We all have it, each and every one of us. We expect instant gratification, and we get at least a little annoyed when it doesn't happen. The world instills this attitude in us to the extent that if something happens and it's not just the way we expected it to be, sometimes we can't even notice anything else that's happening. All we can do is focus on this thing that we didn't get or that let us down. These are the lessons that the world teaches us. And yet, if we're being honest, we know that there are many important aspects of life that cannot be solved quickly at all. If you possess the ability to perceive the brokenness of this world, if you are gifted with compassion for the suffering of others, if you have the gift of empathy that allows you to feel for something that is not happening to you, if you are courageous enough to confess the imperfection of your own life, then you will find yourself crying out, "How long, O Lord, how long will I cry to you, and you will not do anything about it?" To put this in terms we will all understand, why, dear, gracious, almighty, loving God, why will you not bring justice and love and all that is good into this world with the same speed that I can get Amazon.com to deliver something on my doorstep? Where are you? Do you know what the definition of violence is? The exact definition of violence is a swift and intense force. The prophet Habakkuk cries out, screams, "I cry to you violence," and you do nothing. Living in a violent world, living in a fast-paced world that changes swiftly, with or without us, it conditions our spirits, it conditions our bodies to expect violence. And when that's all we know to expect, we find ourselves crying out to God to bring God's own form of violence and change this world dramatically, quickly, overnight. Do it now. Can't you hear us cry? If violence is all we know, then violence is all we know to ask for. And what God whispers to the prophet, what God whispers to each and every one of us on this day and this entire Advent season, God whispers, "I am not a God of violence. I am God of the cosmos. I am God of all creation. My ways are not the ways of the world." Our faith tradition celebrates the liturgical calendar year, a year that begins in Advent and ends in what we call ordinary time. It takes us through the story of Jesus' birth, life, death, resurrection, and it helps teach us ways of welcoming God and welcoming this divine source of life into our ordinary human lives every single day. Joan Chittister, a Benedictine nun, she has written this: "The liturgical year is one of the teaching dimensions of the Church. It is a lesson in life. The lesson our Church teaches us week in and week out is how to follow in the ways of God rather than following in the ways of the world. And it's a lesson that always begins the same way, with Advent. A season of expectation, a season of anticipation, anticipating God's new creation, God's new way of being born into this world. It's a season filled with questions. It's a season that leads us to deeper ways of understanding our God and understanding what God requires of us in our lives. Habakkuk saw that there are people in this world who are satisfied. They are proud. They are successful. They don't have a care in the world. They are people who don't ask big questions, who don't seem bothered with the suffering of others. They seem just fine with the way things are. And to those people, God has said, their spirit is not right with them. And to all of us who are not satisfied with the state of this world, Habakkuk declares to us, God's ways are slow. They are faithful and eternal. And the call of the faithful is to impatiently wait for the day of God's justice to arrive, while living in the world as if it were here already. God creates. Creation takes a long time. It's constantly happening. God chooses to work with human partners. God operates through relationship and covenant. These are not quick. These are not speedy. These are not expedient. These are slow. Think of the important relationships in your life. Did that happen overnight? Relationships are slow. God doesn't seem to strike with lightning bolts. God seems to grow out of how we learn to care for one another. God has established a universe with certain physical properties, with certain laws of physics. And God seems to operate within those rules. God respects those boundaries. God doesn't overpower them. God doesn't act in defiance of them, which includes us. God created each and every one of us with the gift of free will, to make our own choices, to live our own lives. These gifts of God that we talk about all the time, freedom, trust, respect, forgiveness, mercy, hope, joy, peace, love. These aren't quick things. They're the most powerful things in the universe, and they are not fast at all. So God implores us to wait. Wait for the day that these things are flourishing in the world. And while you're waiting, act as if they're here already. And can I share with you the best news that I have to share? This is a community that already does this so beautifully. You practice this so majestically. In December of 2015, I witnessed my first Christmas fair here at this church. I wasn't even your pastor yet. You had voted on me, but I wasn't going to start until January. And the day that you voted me as your new pastor, and the day that you welcomed Emily and I to live among you, many of you didn't even say, hello, congratulations, before you said, you've got to come back for the Christmas fair. And I was just down the road in Boston, so I did as I was told. I rented a car and I came up, and I came into the parish house, and it was the most stressed out I've ever been in my life. There was so much happening, and there were so many people smiling and greeting and offering and doing all kinds of things, and everyone knew my name, and I didn't know any of yours. There were people there from the search committee, and it was like, maybe I've met you before, I don't know. It was so overwhelming and panicked, and there was a line of people, you hadn't even opened yet, and there was a line of people stretched out to the parking lot waiting to get in. And I stuck around for the first few minutes of the fair before I had to excuse myself. It was too much, and I couldn't handle it. But before I left, feeling very overwhelmed and very scattered, several of you pulled me aside and whispered in my ear, you know, we spend all year preparing for this. And I was like, you do? Oh. I left here with a very quick, very immediate, very negative experience of what this thing is. And in the back of my mind, as I drove back to Boston, I was like, are we really going to spend all year preparing for this? Am I up for this? Am I actually the person they want? It took a year, a whole year, for me to actually appreciate what this thing is. Over the course of 365 days, I'm not kidding, as soon as this fair is over at 8 o'clock on Friday night, somebody among you is going to start talking about the next one, the 2019 one. You spend 365 days of the year, countless numbers of you spend countless minutes and hours throughout the year planning, crafting, organizing, advertising, recruiting, searching, cleaning, mending, inviting, dreaming, countless tasks, baking, wreath making, candy making, singing, countless tasks and chores spread throughout the entire year. Carefully, slowly, anticipating the arrival of the big day. By the way, the big day lasts all of 5 hours. You're preparing the entire year for these 5 hours. At the end of which you have raised thousands of dollars, and you don't keep a penny of it. All that money gets collected, and then the Women's Fellowship does the hard work of deciding where does it go, where is it most needed, who gets what. And none of it is for us. All of it is for people who are in need of it more than we are. Thousands of dollars every year. Because each and every one of you take the time to slowly serve, to quietly and calmly, in ways that mostly go unseen and unnoticed by anybody. You slowly prepare for this, leading all the way up to this big day. Between the financial resources raised, the community that is strengthened, the people that are served, from the guests who come in, whose hearts are warmed and brought to life by the hope and the creativity and the joy and the welcome that they experience in that room, to the people who need the money that we raise, this event is immeasurably powerful and important. It influences the lives and it changes the hearts of people we'll never even know about. And it all happens because there are disciples among you who spend an entire year slowly, quietly, in tiny little ways, preparing for this big day. All of it done not for our own sake, but for the sake of our customers and those we are called to serve. Siblings of faith, this is the kind of slow, steadfast, faithful practice that allows God to break into our world. We live in a world that is soul sick. Our spirits are so unwell that we need to find quick ways of enjoying ourselves moment to moment, terrified of what might happen if we slow down or take a break. If something bothers us, we let people know. If we don't agree with something, we voice that out loud. We are not comfortable being uncomfortable. So to you, my friends, to you who are courageous enough to wonder, to you who are brave enough to love, to you who are strong enough to have compassion for other people, to those of you looking for deeper and bigger questions to ask in your life, hear the words of the prophet. Hope can only be perceived in darkness. God is made known in this world through tiny acts of mercy, through relationships that develop over time, through questions that take ages to answer. So before we leave this place, let's prepare to receive God into this world like we prepare for the Christmas fair. Slowly, working in the ways of God, creating, inviting, preparing, faithfully living and waiting, until suddenly The day that God breaks into our world has arrived. If you are comfortably able, please stand and join us in singing the next hymn.